Alex McCarthy, Talk Wrestling. Thank you for joining us. How are you?
I'm great, thank you, man. Weirdly enough, I've just had a week off work per se, but not really. Like, I had a week off from writing for the talkSPORT website, but obviously I still had my show on the Monday. I've got a YouTube show during the week now as well. So the evenings were still work time, but at least I had a bit more time during the day to chill out with my kids, get the tree up, which is not a good tree. So yeah, it's been cool, man. It's been cool to have some time, and now I'm ready to hit it for Christmas.
Is there ever such thing as a day off when you're a content creator? Like you said, when you've got your own personal projects, you've got talkSPORT. I imagine most days are at least filled with one thing you've got to do, or write, or produce, or something.
Yeah, I mean, invariably, like you're always setting things up if you're not actually doing them. So, like for my show on the Monday, there's obviously interviews that I have to cut. 9 times out of 10 we probably pre-record. We do have people on live sometimes, but generally speaking, because obviously they're in America and whatnot, there's a lot of lining things up that don't always work out.
Yeah.
So we pre-record a lot of stuff, and then like you just said, I mean, my typical days at the moment, I get up to take my kids to school, then I work for talkSPORT. Like that's my quote unquote 9 to 5, and then I've got the YouTube show which is like 8 till 9. I have my interviews. They go on the Inside the Ropes.
Yeah.
So I send those videos to there, and I write for the Wrestle Talk magazine as well. Like the other day, obviously, like I told you, I was off work this week. I think it was like Tuesday, and then can I swear on this podcast?
Yeah, of course.
And I was just like, like fuck, basically. It was like 1 a.m, and I was like, oh no, I totally forgot that I'd said that I would. The deadline or whatever it was, and I was like, oh no. So I literally had to stay up to I had to crack out 2,000 words. I'd stay up for like 3, like it's like 3:30, 4 in the morning, and then like I said, I have to get up and get my kids to school too. So it's just like stuff like that. Sometimes I forget. I need a secretary, man. Like that's what I need.
I don't know how you managed to do 2,000 words like that, because I don't even think I did 2,000 words for my university dissertation, and I had a year to do that. I can't imagine doing that last minute, but.
To be fair, like because obviously the thing I do for the magazine is basically a roundup of the biggest news stories around the month. And bearing in mind that like I spent a lot of time on those stories every day anyway, it comes fairly easy. To just elaborate and describe those. But the writing aspect of my life is getting less and less, which I never really thought would be the case. But sometimes I still get a dose of reality. So there you go.
Before we mention wrestling as well, I noticed me and you have something else in common. We both have a love for the Mighty Magpies.
I thought I sensed it in your voice. I thought I did, but then you could have always been a Mackham, so I was scared.
Good God, no! I'm a Newcastle fan myself. I had to throw that in there. I knew we're both Newcastle fans, so I had to throw it in there just before we talk any wrestling.
That's football, right?
Yeah.
Magpies.
Callum's not a football fan, Alex, but yes, Callum football.
I will show you something. I mean, people won't be able to see this, but you can't even see me, can you?
He can, I can.
You can have that's a Newcastle tattoo I have on my arm there.
It's definitely something that looks like a football thing.
So basically, like my family, my granddad, my mum's side were from up there. That's how it all came about.
I tell you what, even if I don't understand it, it's a beautiful tattoo. I really like that.
Thank you.
Which I can't see, so Callum's got to take a screenshot and send me it later.
Dude, you can see I put the episode up. So.
Yeah. Well, I just have to throw it out because now I know that I'm not alone. There's at least 2 of us, Alex.
Yeah, 2 long-suffering blokes at least.
Oh, good God, yes. Don't we just suffer? But talking wrestling, and I mean, obviously, you got this talkSPORT, this talk wrestling. How did your journey into wrestling begin? I mean, how long have you been a fan?
The journey is a weird one, but I mean, as far as how long I've been a fan, I would say I started watching 97-ish. Like my earliest memories are kind of, I mean, I did catch like glimpses of it and stuff, I think, as from 96, like, and this is really, really showing my age, but back then you had like just a black cable box. You didn't actually have like Sky or Virgin or whatever. And I remember on a Friday night you would get Raw on 15, which was Sky Sports, and I think 26, I want to say, was TNT. I could be wrong on that number, but either way, you get WCW, and I remember seeing that NWO, but I didn't really understand like what was happening. It wasn't until sort of just after the Montreal Screwjob, around that period, that I was really into it, and like, I fell in love with The Rock in '98, and that kind of accelerated all of. Yeah, he was like my guy, and that was that really. Like, it was a lot of, I mean, back then, I hate saying things like back then, but back then, in school, it was like, it was the thing. Like, everyone was talking about wrestling and, you know, doing moves on each other and shit. Like, that was kind of the way it was. So now, obviously, or, you know, even if you're in secondary school, whatever, I imagine there's much more of a stigma where it's like, oh, you like wrestling, but back then. Yeah. Back then, in like certainly sort of primary school and beyond, it was like the cool thing. So
yeah, from like year 6 to year 7, it was the coolest thing.
Yeah,
I was in the same boat, absolutely. Yeah, high school, and all my friends were like you. They were all fans of The Rock, whereas I was a Triple H fan. So those water cooler moments, as you call them, on a Monday morning at school were brilliant. I was the only Triple H fan out of everybody. It was great. It was a great time. I loved it. I spent many a times getting 3D'd by my school friends for being a Triple H fan.
When I interviewed Triple H, I told him straight up. I was like, I know you'll take it as a compliment, but like, I fucking hated you basically as a kid, just because I loved The Rock so much, and I was like, oh, goddamn Triple H. But yeah, like that. I mean, really, it was school, but then my mum. I never really lived. My dad like moved out when I was very young, so I spent a lot of time at my grandparents. Why my mum would study and things like that, and I was just close to my grandparents anyway. And it was my gran, of all people, who was the real driving force behind it. She really got into it too. She loved The Rock as well, and so like obviously back then it was Friday nights was Raw on Sky, and then you'd get SmackDown Saturday mornings at like 11.
Yeah.
And she would record all of them for me, and she'd record the pay-per-views so that when I got home from school on the Monday, I could see what had happened and watch it and stuff. Because it seems crazy, but back then, obviously, like, I didn't know what the Wrestling Observer message boards were, or like dirt sheets or anything like that. So I never had an idea what was going to happen. Or
Good times, right?
Yeah, great times. I didn't have a phone to, go on the internet and find out what happened or rumors or anything like that. I just watched it. So I miss it dearly, that state of fandom. But that was definitely it.
The other day, it kind of broke the magic for me that when I found my first wrestling message board, and I went on and people posted spoilers for a taped show, and I was like, how do you guys know like what's happening before it's happened? I don't get it. And someone was like, oh, they tape it. And I was like, okay. And then someone was like, well, they started using all these terms like face and heel, and the penny dropped for me. I knew it was kind of predetermined, but then I found out it's all predetermined, and I lost that innocence. And I feel like when I wish if I could go back and just never go on message boards or anything, stay off the internet, I would, because it was a good time to be a fan.
Yeah. So I don't think I really did that until maybe like, I don't know, like 2011, 12-ish. Like I really stayed off it a long time. It wasn't something that I did like, a lot of people do. I had a couple of like quote unquote sabbaticals from wrestling where, but I mean, I think my first one was when The Rock left, because I was like that much of a fan that I was just a bit like, and at that point you got to remember, I think I'm like, how old was I when The Rock left? 2003. God, my maths is really terrible. Strong suit here. I was 15, so when obviously you start to think about different things at 15, and I just I don't know, like at the time I was a bit like, oh, Brock Lesnar, and I don't know, it just didn't really do it for me. Look, retrospectively I've gone back and like, wow, but at the time I just kind of fell out of it for a little bit, and then I went to uni. I went to university, and I had a housemate in my second year who was kind of into it, and I got back into it. And it was when DX had just had the reunion and all of that stuff, like 2006, 7. And then again, when I left uni, I didn't have Sky for like a year, so once again, I just didn't really bother keeping up with it. But then my friend, I went around his house one day and he had it on, and Daniel Bryan was wrestling.
Right.
And I'd never really watched Daniel Bryan before, and I was just like, who is this guy? Like, he looked really ordinary, but the way he was wrestling was anything but. And I was just like, wow, okay. And yeah, honestly, since then, I've just week to week. So it's been, wrestling is kind of like that, though, isn't it? It's not like a love-hate thing. It's just a bit, I don't know. Everyone seems to have that kind of space where they didn't like, or not like it, but watch it.
We've always said it's like a relationship that you keep going back to. It can be really bad, but you think about the good times and you go back to it, and you can never truly get away from it.
Like you said earlier as well, like it's, you like wrestling originally for what you like it for.
Yeah.
But then as you get older, you find different things to like and appreciate, right? So like now when you watch a show and, you judge everything, you're like, oh my God, like this person's getting a push, or, oh, why did he job out here? He's got this match coming up, or whatever. Like, and it's kind of it's actually mind-numbing just to say it like that. Like,
it is, isn't it?
But at the same time, you can't help it because we know like what we know. So it's just,
it's almost like we don't watch it for the wrestling anymore. We watch it for the insider stuff sometimes. Like, well, if he's won that match, he might be getting a push to this, and he lost this match, he's probably leaving the company to go to here or something. It's tiring thinking of all these little things instead of just going, oh, he won a match. That's cool.
It's hard to remember, isn't it? How you really?
Yeah.
Like, I remember just watching The Rock and thinking he was just the most entertaining bloke ever. That's pretty much, I thought it was cool. It's just those characters that you gravitate to.
Yeah.
Whereas now, I mean, I more love performers now for their work than. And that's easy to say because there isn't many Rock or Stone Cold today, right? But probably the closest thing we had to that in terms of charisma character, we could maybe Punk, I guess.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I just think it's very different the way I consume it now. Like, I like the wrestlers from the standpoint that I've spoken to the majority of them too, and if you get on with them when you do, I always think like no matter who the talent is, you kind of want the best for them, but. I with the people that I really, really love, and I don't know who I would put in that bracket right now, but it normally is now the performance aspect, I would say.
Yeah.
Like I appreciate on another level. I think back in the day, I wasn't that concerned with like, is this a 5-star match or not? Like,
yeah, I get that. I think when I did find the forums when I was younger, I became what you'd call, I guess, a smark very quickly. I thought I knew all about the business, but looking back, I really knew nothing, and still do. But now I'm older, I'm just like, I care more about the moments that in the ring, like the Undertaker's last appearance or something, or the Boneyard match, instead of like an actual in-ring classic, so to speak. Like people are always telling me you need to watch more New Japan to be a real wrestling fan, and I'm like, well, I hate that term for a start, real wrestling fan. If you watch wrestling of any company and you're a fan of it, you're a wrestling fan, right?
Go on.
I don't get it. I think it's a Twitter mentality sometimes, that whole real wrestling fan thing. The toxicity comes from that side of things.
I personally enjoy the kind of like, and it's not always on the money, of course, but the like entertainment aspect that comes with WWE and the storylines, and AEW for that matter too. New Japan is much more of the in-ring product, and while of course it is like of a high level, to me it doesn't always connect because I'm not as invested in the people. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I get it.
It could be different if I watched it all the time, but I watched the G1 and I watched Wrestle Kingdom, and like again, I've seen some great matches, but like, I just don't know if it feels the same to me. It's not a knock on New Japan; it's just my personal preference, and I think that should be the same for anyone. Absolutely. You can like what you like; it doesn't matter. Like you said, there's something for everyone in today's landscape. Like Impact is you know, and they proudly say this, more Attitude Era kind of centric. And then obviously, you know, WWE's had its PG phase and whatever we're doing now, and then AEW is kind of creating this buzz and stuff too. Like, there's a lot of different ways and companies to consume, and I don't think you should really be shamed for any of them. I think WWE, in a lot of people's eyes, and this is like going back to what you said, the smarks. I think they just think it's cool to crap on WWE a lot of the time. I really do. Like, because even when they do good work, like, people resist celebrating it so much, and then you're like, you know, if I would do that. I remember saying NXT takeovers are like the best wrestling shows in the world, and at one time I felt that was very true. Like, like, how many takeovers miss? Not many. And then people will be like, you WWE shill you, and you're like, oh, come on, man. Like,
I said about you before, and that's not a knock, because I think you're fantastic with the work you do. But I'm sure I've seen you put out a tweet before saying something like, I'm not on the payroll, or I'm not, you know, I'm not working for, you know, it's, I think it's one of those things that when you're a journalist, you kind of have to justify your fandom sometimes. I've seen Ryan Satin do it before, you know, saying, I'm not on the payroll, I'm just a fan. I'm being paid to report on something, and it's good. Doesn't mean I'm being paid or I'm a shill for it. I'm just doing my job. But the internet would rather believe that you're just getting paid to say good things about the company.
Yeah, it's such a weird thing. Like, I mean, even Ryan's a good example that you just brought up, because he won't. I've seen him tweet recently. He won't even talk about AEW now, because he just feels it's a conflict of interest being a WWE analyst. I mean, I've said so many times, like, people will rush to judgment basically just based on that tweet. They don't even like know you. So I might put out something pro NXT, and they'll be like, oh, you know, whatever, you're chill, and because they see that I do a lot of WWE interviews, but they don't see that, you know, I say 9 times out of 10 that Dynamite has had the better week, or you know, or the AEW interviews that I've done, and there's a lot of them, like Young Bucks, Cody, and like, just to name a couple at the very top, Moxley as well, Jericho. Like, they just kind of ignore that, and then you find yourself repeating yourself. Like, I've given up on that now, because I will I will end up just like listening, like, well, hang on, you're kind of ignoring everything that I've done here. And you just think, well, if they don't want to see it, they don't want to see it now. And that's one thing you have to kind of realize and let go, almost, is that you're not gonna, like, not everyone's gonna like you. They're not, like, whether you like it or not. Some people have their heart set on it from the get-go, so there's no point, like, there's no point kind of battling that. I like now sometimes, and obviously it helps with filters, Twitter's filter system now. But if I see someone who's just intentionally looking to aggravate me for no good reason, really, because I'm one of the least confrontational people you'll find on Twitter. But I think the word I always use is, like, if someone is sincere with what they're saying to you or not, and if it isn't straight away, and I just think, nah, not for me, I just ignore it.
Yeah. Well, just on a lighter note, I can now see you, Alex. So,
oh, hello.
Hi. Hello. Well, what happened there, I don't know, but I can now see you. Talking, obviously, before I asked you about talkSPORT as well, Talk Wrestling. You said about, like, entertainment and, like, the characters and all that. I mean, what's your take on Sting then this week with Dynamite?
I mean, it's a weird one, right? Like, I mean, every part of me wants to say, like, my gut is like, yeah, it's great, cool, very, very cool for him, cool for AEW. I have no idea how they're going to use him, which is a good and a confusing thing at the same time. But there are things you can do with a 61-year-old legend. Like, it doesn't have to, you know, be a part of their roster and be wrestling per se. He might wrestle, but I think it's still amazingly cool if he's just involved and a manager, or, you know, an authority figure, for want of a better term, you know, just kind of being involved with the show. Yeah. He adds value for that. He obviously felt that he had more to give, and WWE really, in my opinion, dropped the ball a little bit when they wouldn't. You know, he's like, okay, he lost to Triple H, then he lost to Rollins, and obviously all the neck problems, and then it's like, oh, well, we've got nothing for him then. Do you know what I mean? They just kind of, they could have done stuff with him, I think, and it's a shame they didn't. But, you know, what's is WWE's lost is AEW's gain, and I I love it as long as it's not like silly and it's not like unsafe, then great.
Well, what I found funny was as soon as they added him to the roster page, they have the win-loss record thing.
Yeah.
People went crazy about that, going, why has he got a win-loss record? Why is he going to be active every week? And I'm like, no one said he's going to be active every week. He's not going to be wrestling on Dark. He's probably going to have like build it up to a tag match with Darby. Have that cool moment, passing of the torch with Darby Allin. And if he's on the roster page, he's got to have that win-loss record. It's just what everyone's got. I was like, you're looking way too far into it, but they were just looking for any reason to pick it apart. And all I'm wanting from this Sting arrival is a tag team match with Darby. Sting hits the Scorpion Death drop. Darby Allin hits the coffin drop. Done. And that's like the passing of the torch. That'll be great. Then transition him into like a manager's role or like an advisor or something. And you've got one of the best minds in the business, one of the best pure baby faces who can like coach the younger talent. That's so valuable and worth anything they're paying him. But people are making it out like he's going to be facing John Moxley in 60-minute matches. It's not going to happen.
No, I think you're exactly right. Like there is definitely a place and a value on Sting. That's the best way I can put it. I think, and looking at Tony Khan and the way he's handled everything recently, I've got every faith that he will know how to use him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously the big one as well. So how did talkSPORT come about and talk wrestling there? Because as a UK fan, it's something I think we needed is that wrestling radio show. So how did that come about?
Yeah, man.
Tell us the journey.
Yeah, it was a journey. The job with talkSPORT to begin with was something like I was working for a company called Give Me Sport and doing wrestling bits for them. And all of a sudden, like the numbers had kind of exploded, and I was doing more and more WWE interviews, and like my name was like building slowly. Like it was nothing like nothing groundbreaking or anything, but it was like I was doing occasional interviews that more and more people and outlets were starting to pick up, and it was like, okay, getting a bit of rhythm here. I went to WrestleMania 34, which was the second Mania I've been to. And when I was out there was a couple of guys, funnily enough, my co-host from Talk Wrestling Now, Will Gavin, were out there for talkSPORT. But they were only ever really on-air presenters. So the connection between on-air and website was like non-existent. You'd be very surprised how like two-tier the company is.
Right.
Like it's not like one big office where it's very, very weird. Anyway, so they didn't even have like a wrestling show. They were just presenters who, people. I think it was 2K who were working with them at the time.
Yeah.
Who then, they want them to read stuff about wrestling on their radio show. So anyway, time moved on a little bit, and another thing is we're owned by the same company as the Sun. News UK is an umbrella that has like the Times, the Sun, talkSPORT, a few other different things. And we share an office with the Sun, and there was a guy in that WrestleMania from the Sun, a guy called Dan Cutts, and he was speaking to the manager of talkSPORT. They got given a load of money to like invest a website to, for the first time ever, basically, like to expand it, bring people in. And they were like, yeah, man, we really want to actually press on with the wrestling stuff. And then that Cutts basically said, well, Alex is the guy you want then. And he put me in touch with him. And we had a meeting and stuff, and we went back and forth. And eventually, they were like, they basically just said, we want the WWE numbers you're doing at Give Me Sport, and we want them at talkSPORT. So I went there, and in like 2018, I think talkSPORT had done like maybe 30,000 clicks on wrestling.
Yeah.
And by the end of my first year, and bearing in mind, I'm literally the only one doing it. I didn't have a team; it's just me. Yeah. In 2019, we'd done 14 million. So like
14 million.
14 million.
Jesus.
So in June of that year, this again my first year there, I basically sent the numbers as they were at that moment, and I sent in the difference, and I sent it over to the boss of talkSPORT, the actual boss, a guy called Lee Clayton, and I said, there's obviously people who care. Like we obviously can have an audience. We don't have this show at the moment. Like, wouldn't it be worth thinking about And to be fair, he was really cool. He was like, yeah, okay, we'll think about it, whatever. But, you do this for now. And I was going on like Hawksby and Jacobs or Alan Brazil, and I was just doing little bits, like little wrestling tidbits of what we were up to or whatever. And he was like, we'll see how this goes. We'll see how they react to it, because they're very worried, and talkSPORT still are, to be honest, about how people will perceive it.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's talkSPORT, right?
Yeah.
And in the comments, people are going to be like, it's not really a sport. So I think they're always worried about that backlash. But I said, look, we're doing this on our website. People are coming to our website. It's obviously not like a lost cause per se. Look at these numbers. So that was how it started. I started to lose a bit of faith towards the end of the year, because it was one of them where like I hadn't heard from anyone, and and I'd even sent like a little nudge, like, yeah, the numbers are still good, and he was just a bit like, yeah, whatever, mate. So in January, I eventually spoke to the head of talkSPORT 2, which is obviously just basically a peg down. And he said, well, maybe we'll give you like a 5-minute show. It's so ridiculous now that I'm saying it. Like a 5-minute show, or like a 5-10 minute segment in our US based show. I think they have like a what for like NFL, NBA, and they were like, we'll just put you on that show. I was like, that sounds terrible. Like to come in and do that slot every week. I was like, how am I actually meant to cover everything? Yeah. Anyway, so I remember then the head producer, who actually is a wrestling fan, again rare breed, but in talkSPORT Towers anyway, but he is. Yeah. And he was one of the first people I ever spoke to about it, and I was just really dejected after meeting the guy, and I was like, it just feels a bit of a waste of time, like, because we were going to the Royal Rumble that weekend to cover it. I was like, look, like people would kill for us. Like, we're going there, we're going to be interviewing like Bailey, Samoa Joe, like the Undisputed Era. We had so many interviews. I was like, so much content. I was like, people would literally kill for what the access and stuff we're getting here, and we're just like doing fuck all with it basically. So I was a bit like, oh, this sucks. And then literally later that night, I was playing COD and I got like a WhatsApp, and he was like, anyway, you got a show now. I was like, what? He's like, yeah. Like, so it was the day I got back from the Royal Rumble. So my flight came in at 6:30 in the morning, and I had to be in the studio for 6. So the production meeting was at like 4. So I like literally was like, he just texted me the week before I went to the Rumble and was like, yeah, well, the day you land, the show's launching. He was like, think of a name. I was like, what? What do you mean? So that was that. He was like, think of a co-host, whatever. We'll sort it out. So I was like, oh, all right. Well, so it went from like nothing to really fast, really quick.
Yeah.
And then he eventually, like we had like a meeting just before I went to the Rumble, and even though he told me to think of a name, he was like, look, we're going to go with Talk Wrestling. It used to be called Talk Wrestling, like 20 years ago. And he goes, and because they were bringing back Alex Shane, they were like, it just makes sense, right? We'll just call it Talk Wrestling. And I was like, okay. And I didn't really have any good names anyway. So I was like, whatever. Yeah,
fair enough.
Talk Wrestling sounds fine to me, whatever. Obviously, I'm sure you're aware, the Alex Shane thing did not work out well for us. That was undoubtedly the biggest bump in the road we've had thus far. Yeah, we're approaching the 1-year anniversary now, and things have been great, but like that period of time, I was certain like they were going to do away with the show. I just thought, well, like it's tarred now. We didn't. I'm going to stop myself saying what I was going to say. I don't think the whole situation was handled amazingly, and the less said about what he's been accused of, the better. So it's one of them things that at that point, that's when Will became involved there, which is weird, because obviously we'd known each other for a while, and I knew he was one of the very few wrestling allies I had in the station, but it just made all the sense in the world that he would then step into the breach and then we'd off to the races. So, I mean, it was so, like I said, that day, I remember landing from the Rumble so tired, so I could never sleep on a plane. But not being able to sleep when I got home because I was so excited about like the show, like excited and nervous. I've been on air for like extended periods of time, but never been like the guy per se.
Yeah.
So, man, it was wild. But I'm so glad. Like when we announced that it was coming back, and like you just said, the UK fan base were really, really receptive. Like, yeah, it's about time, basically.
Yeah.
And you know, my favourite part of the show, yeah, it's great, the interviews and stuff. But I just love it when the amount of people that call in and the great conversations we can just have about wrestling. It's just, I've said this before. Like, I find Twitter to be such a toxic, weird place sometimes to talk about wrestling.
With you on that. Yeah, totally agree.
Like, it's people, you can't have a dialogue with anyone who doesn't have an agenda, basically. For instance, and I hate to tar Sasha Banks, but her fan base are vociferous. If you say anything remotely negative about her, no matter how constructive or just observational, they will come and get you, right? And it's but where the thing I like about my show is that everyone's opinion is kind of welcomed and to a degree celebrated and supported, and I feel like it's a real open democracy forum that you can just have good, objective, respected chats where, for wrestling fans, that is not always an easy thing to do. So that's one thing I am proud
I've never seen that.
never
seen that before.
Now, I know you mentioned the interviews and stuff, and I know I'm going to ask you anyway. I did a bit of research, and there's two people especially. I know Triple H. What was it like speaking to Triple H? Because obviously I'm a huge Triple H guy. So it's always nice to know that. Is he as cool as he comes across? Because he just seems like a down-to-earth, cool guy.
Yeah. So I speak to Triple H fairly regularly because, of course, the NXT. He does a lot of media for NXT and NXT UK. So at this point, it's still pretty surreal. Like he knows who I am.
That's the coolest name drop you can ever do. Oh yeah, me and Paul, we talk quite regular. Yeah.
But he's so it's always a bit mind blowing. When we walk in the same room, I think he's not gonna I remember I think I was at the NXT UK Performance Centre. I thought he ain't gonna remember. Even though we'd sat down for half an hour, but he ain't gonna remember. And then he came up to me and shook my hand and asked me how I was doing and stuff, and I was like, oh Jesus, my friend Paul. So it's cool. Again. Obviously, I came to love and respect Triple H as I grew older as a wrestling fan. And weirdly enough, when I sat down with him for that half an hour, that was in Cardiff before NXT UK Takeover, and I had been offered to go to AEW All Out, which you'll remember was the same night. And so I'd gone to Double or Nothing for AEW, and which was the May of that year.
Yeah.
And they'd said again, you're free to come out and we'll do this, this, and this. And I'd said to WWE, well, because they'd invited me to take over, I said, well, I'm probably going to go to Chicago, no offense. Come on. And then they were like, well, yeah, okay, well, what about sitting down with Triple H for, I think the original pitch was 20 minutes. And I was like, yeah, sold. What more could I want than that? A full-on expose. And the chat, it just helps that the chat we had was, if I don't say so myself, really, really good. He was really open, and we got to so many headline worthy stuff that he said in the interview that just helped me exponentially. It was just, it was great. He was there were some questions that he really didn't have to answer if he didn't want to, but he did. Even some of the questions where I was like, people think Vince is going to take over NXT as soon as you start fucking out, basically. And he could have easily been like, nah, but he did. He gave me really good answers. So I think he's one of the most, I know it's cerebral assassin and all that, but he is one of the smartest blokes you'll ever meet. He really is, especially when it comes to the media. I think people don't realise how smart he is when he's very meticulous about what
he's got an answer for everything, hasn't he?
Yeah, but he's very, very meticulous about what he says and who he says it to. I think he's very calculated in the way that he goes about his business. He goes about his business. So I mean, to me, when people ask me what's the greatest interview, I typically say him, because again, not only was it amazing and the stature of the person, but the actual interview itself is something I'm proud of.
Yeah, it's a surreal thing, like you said as well. I mean, obviously, me and Callum, we've spoke to people as well. We've spoke to Gallows and Anderson and Lance Archer and people, but we were talking the other night. We've got this regular now with Kerry Silkin up in Ring of Honor. Kerry's coming on monthly now, and it's surreal to us. Like me and Callum were saying the other night, Harry still knows our name, and like we're
Even
friends now.
a sport, like just knowing that these people that you watched growing up know who you are, it's a very surreal and humbling experience. I can't imagine what it's like to have Triple H come up to you and say, "Oh, you alright, Alex? How you doing, mate?" You know, I'd be like, "Fuck."
Yeah, exactly. It's mad, but even then, like, and like Twitter obviously has made the world like a lot smaller. Like a lot of the superstars that I interview, you end up becoming, what Twitter friends with, I guess. And then like, so like I inbox Drew fairly regularly, just like, and it's not like scoops, but if like something cool, but if something like cool happens or whatever, and I remember messaging him after the sale, and I was just like, "Fuck, that was a bump." And we were just talking about that. He said he was just shitting his pants. He didn't want to do it because he's scared of heights. But
that's so cool.
Yeah, it's just little things like that. And even like I remember Zelina Vega as well. Like when she got released, I spoke to her fairly quickly because I'd shut down a report from the New York Post, and she messaged me saying, "Well, like thank you," because it clearly was bollocks. And Mickey James is another one who's really nice like that. I mean, I'm trying to think of people I'm followed by on Twitter from WWE. Like R-Truth is another one, but I don't speak to him that much. But that's just like
actually, I know you've interviewed R-Truth. Is that right?
Yeah, very good one. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what was it like? Because me and Callum love him. I mean, I'm in stitches watching that guy. I mean, what was it like to sit down and interview him?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was Zoom, unfortunately, but he's he's exactly what you think he is, man. He's just so like, he's just so full of like life and positivity. He's like, and the best you can describe it, he's just so naturally hilarious. Like, you know those people that aren't even really trying, but like their mannerisms and stuff are just so funny. And like it was cool because when I got to interview, I don't think anyone had really asked him about the Brock Lesnar segment or working with The Rock at Survivor Series or being someone who's worked for WWE for so long. So it was and the 24/7 stuff too. So like there was a lot to get back, and because we got on so well, and it's virtually impossible not to get on well with him. He was so we had a great interview. That's just the great recipe right there. Like you can't fail with that sort of thing. So, like I said, guys like him, Gaza, there's like a load of them that are actually pretty proactive on Twitter, and if you have a question, for instance, then they'll generally tell you. But like, I guess I dispel the myth though that like, if I ever, the people who tell you things aren't really ever the wrestlers, hardly ever.
Yeah.
So there you have it.
Yeah. Before we wrap up as well, I've got to ask you, AEW and Impact, it looks like they're working together. And I noticed Triple H has come out and said, WWE, we're open for business. Do you think at some point down the road we might see them finally work with other companies?
No.
I like your honesty.
I agree.
But... Yeah, no, not while Vince is alive, at least. I think, that the mentality obviously comes from the head down, and to a degree, I can understand it. Like they look at it as if like they'd only be helping anyone else. There's how much is in it for them, right? And as much as we sit here and we go, but wouldn't it be cool to do that or do this? Like, and it would. It'd be amazing for the fans, and they might get more fans, or they might, enter another great period of whatever. At the end of the day, though, whoever they work with stands to make more from the relationship than they do. And I think just old school WWE mentality won't let Vince open himself up to that. Now, Triple H, there's a chance. If he is the one who takes the reins after Vince, which we all presume that he will, I would think it's more plausible. I still would not expect like an AEW collaboration, or something like that. I really wouldn't. But Triple H has already shown with ICW, Progress, WXW, a whole host of other Evolve. Like he obviously the difference between what Impact and AEW are doing and what Triple H has done with those companies is that he works with them to eventually gut them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He ends up taking their talent, and that's kind of the way that works. I mean, I'm doing there'd be fantasy booking would be, seeing even NXT versus AEW or WWE versus AEW, whatever. And I honestly believe that AEW would do it. Of course I do.
Yeah.
Kenny Omega has said as much, and Tony Khan is probably the most freewheeling and dealing guy going. But by the same token, why wouldn't they? Working with the biggest company with the biggest platform, it's whichever way you shake it up, WWE are the biggest in the world by a country mile, and AEW. But however great that their TV product is, or however close they get in the ratings, there are still a myriad of different factors and areas that they are miles behind WWE. It will literally take years, maybe decades, to get close.
It'll happen. I personally don't. I think there's nothing wrong with being seen as the alternative to WWE. You don't have to be on the same level. You can just be the best alternative. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think a lot of fans want to see him like dethrone WWE. Well, they're going to be disappointed because that just won't happen. Like you said, there's so many reasons that wouldn't happen. It's not just all about ratings or demographics. There's a reason WWE have thousands of employees. It's because there's so many things you have to take into consideration. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There's just nothing wrong with AEW doing what they're doing now.
It's great. It's great for everyone. It's great for Impact. It's bloody great for Impact.
Absolutely.
But even for AEW, it creates like the sense of intrigue, and it gives their company that fresh outlook and vibe and perception that the wrestling business has lacked for so long, because everyone, and you can be forgiven for it, but everyone is kind of like locked into that WWE way of thinking.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so you think whatever they do and the way they act is just the norm for everyone, because that is wrestling almost, especially in North America. But AEW has shown that, well, they can defy conventions. I see a lot of people being all like, well, why are AEW really doing? Like, what's in it for them? But like, I don't think those people actually get it. So there you go.
Yeah. Obviously, before we wrap up, here's your chance now, Alex, to shill. Tell us where to find you. Tell us, promote everything. Shill yourself.
Oh God, where can't you find me? So obviously, talksport.com/wrestling is where you'll find all your news and interviews. Talk Wrestling is on Mondays 7 till 9 on talkSPORT 2. You can get that on catch up on the app as well. Then my YouTube show is on Wrestle 2, which is a Wrestle Talk YouTube channel. Alex McCarthy's Wrestling Daily is on Tuesdays through Fridays 8 till 9. You can find me in Wrestle Talks magazine every month. And what else do I do? And you'll find my interviews on Inside the Ropes on YouTube as well. I think that is it.
You think?
You can find me on Twitter, of course, as well. Alex _talksport. And that's pretty much where the bulk of my business goes down. The rest of them find their way to Twitter anyway, so that's probably the one.
Jesus. It's a lot of stuff to remember.
It is.
Well, no, man, we can't thank you enough. We really appreciate your time, and we'd love you to come back again, maybe in the new year at some point, if you're happy to do that.
Well, let's do it vice versa. When you guys come on my show.
I would love to. Anytime.
Anytime you want us, man. Anytime. Absolutely, man. I'll drop you a message in the new year. After New Year, we'll sort something out if that's all right with you.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm up for it.
Excellent, man. Thank you very much. But yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. He's Alex McCarthy from Talk Wrestling. We are Ringsiders.